In 19th century France, there was a philosophical battle between two great thinkers of the day. On one side was Louis Pasteur. He said that we must prevent disease and we must kill disease in order to create health. However, Antoine Béchamp disagreed with him fiercely, and he said no. It is poor environments that lead to poor health, and therefore we must create wellness. If we do that, then disease will be far from us. Pasteur won the argument, and so for the last 150 years, his approach has become our way of working. And let's face it, we have achieved some amazing things together as a result. We've seen mass immunization, we've seen the advent of antibiotics and the development of chemotherapy, to name just three. But Béchamp might ask us, are we really well? Where I live in Morecambe Bay, you can walk 6 miles from the village of Overkellet down the wild and rugged coast into the heart of Morecambe and find that life expectancy decreases by 15 years. We have rising childhood poverty and the increasing use of food banks, and we are facing into an epidemic of type 2 diabetes. When we look at the NHS nationally, we have high levels of staff burnout. We have declining staff morale. And every 3 weeks, another one of our doctors takes their own life. And so Béchamp might rightly ask us, have we created environments that help us to be well? Are we really truly well? About 7 years ago, working as a GP in my practice, I ended up crying on my desk one night, feeling completely at the end of myself and ready to quit my job. Our environment at the time amongst our team was very toxic because we felt so overwhelmed with the pressures of everything coming through our doors. I was getting very little time with my family, and I realized that I couldn't really fix the problems that my community were facing. And so I needed to find a fresh approach to my work. Things needed to change. Since that time, whilst maintaining my clinical practice, I've also become the Director of Population Health in Morecambe Bay. It's my opinion that the NHS is a bit behind where our colleagues in local government are, and that we reduce the conversation about health and well-being to being far too much about self-care and personal responsibility. Of course, those things are important. But after a decade of austerity, the choices afforded to some of our communities are far less than they are for others. I believe that we have to get into the much deeper issues of poverty, housing, adverse childhood experiences, pollution, social isolation, with our communities. And we need to learn to stand in solidarity with our communities, to challenge unfair and unkind national policy and societal structures that keep us unwell. It's fairly widely accepted, I think, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I've become really fascinated about how we might create the kind of culture together to stop this sense of overwhelm and reaction in how we work, and how we might take a more positive step, a proactive step, to work more with our communities to build this sense of wellness where we are. And what I've discovered through my work is that there are 4 key foundations on which we need to build wellness. And they happen to begin with the letters H, I, J, and K. Firstly, I believe that we need to create a culture of hope. There is so much in our news cycles and in the context of our work every day right now that might lead us to feeling hopeless. But hope is not built by focusing on everything that is wrong and entering into a cycle of despair. Hope, rather, is built by focusing on what is possible, despite our difficulties and our pain. Our population health team, who I deeply love, together we have been hosting some conversations around Morecambe Bay. And we recently hosted a conversation in the city of Lancaster, a city like many others that faces some really tough issues. And when I asked the people of that city, gathered from many different communities together, what gives this place its heart and soul? And what are your dreams and your visions for the future of this place? They were not short of answers. They began to create the most beautiful picture imaginable of what their city is like now, but of also what it could become over the next 5, 10, 20 years. You see, people are not afraid to dream. The people together were creating a sense of vision and hope, and then even voting on what they wanted their priorities to be for action. That is the economics of well-being and relational politics in action. Hope gives us an amazing foundation on which to build a different kind of future. It allows us to believe that things really could be different, that we really could create the kind of places in which every person can find well-being and purpose, whilst we also care for the environment in which we live. And so let me ask you, how might you create hope where you are? Secondly, I believe that we need to create a culture of inclusivity. One of the greatest privileges of my work over the last few years has been to get involved in something called the Poverty Truth Commission. For those of you who don't know what that is, it brings together people who have expertise through lived experience of poverty, together with those of us who are perhaps more strategic leaders. It has been so humbling for me to realize how often we make decisions on behalf of communities, especially those who are most deprived, without ever involving them in the process. And so we have a strapline in the Poverty Truth Commission that says nothing about us without us is for us. Inclusivity is about a different kind of power. It puts relationship into the heart of everything we do and every decision that we make. When I first met Karen, she was at rock bottom. Her life had absolutely fallen apart. She'd been through a very difficult marriage breakup and then sustained a physical injury that meant that she had to retire from a highly successful job on ill health grounds. Unsurprisingly, she had a mental health breakdown, and then she slid despairingly into poverty as a single mum. Sitting and listening to her story made me realize how utterly naive I am about how complex it is to try and navigate your way through the health, mental health, social care, and welfare system when you are on the ropes. The very time that we actually need our systems to work the best for people can sometimes be the times when they are most humiliating and degrading and dehumanizing. For Karen to have her story heard and to be understood was really healing, and it allowed us to build a relationship so that now we are working together to co-design different bits of the system that need to change when people find themselves in situations like she did. Together with other members of the Commission, we're creating new job roles to help people navigate through the complexities of our system and be treated with real kindness and compassion. I believe that we have to take the lanyards off our neck and embrace a whole load more humility, to step outside the walls of what we think we know into our communities and learn to sit with them, to listen to them, to be with them, to experience the pain that they often sit in and with, and allow it to change us. There's an ancient Aboriginal saying, "I cannot be well unless you are well." I believe that we cannot be well when there are people in our communities who are excluded. So let me ask you, who do you need to include where you are? Thirdly, we need to create a culture of joy. That sounds good, doesn't it? The Institute for Health Innovation have shown that a culture of joy is the single most important determining factor in building a safe, sustainable, and excellent health and care system. Joy is not built by accident. It is not built by telling people to be resilient and just keep calm and carry on despite all the pressures. Stiff upper lips don't help joy. Joy is built very deliberately, and it takes, more than anything, a sense of camaraderie, a sense of belonging, that we are all in this together. Bit High School Musical, that, wasn't it? Sorry. I used to work in a team that seriously lacked joy. In fact, I joined the team shortly after it had been through a very grueling and heart-wrenching national investigation that had found our system to be seriously wanting in the care that we provided. And so, being a bit naive and potentially over-enthusiastic, I decided that we should try and build some joy in what was a bit of a dysfunctional setting. And so in my first meeting as chair, I introduced the team to the idea of a check-in. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's something I learned through the Art of Hosting network, and we use it around the dinner table with our kids when they're not really getting on with each other. So I got this team to sit round in a circle, and as I asked them a question, I said, "I'd love you to tell us how you're really doing, and then tell us all something you love about the person on your left." Yeah, it was horrifically awkward. It went really, really badly. People were scraping the barrel for things to say about each other. We had one guy who genuinely said to the lady on his left, I suppose I like the brooch you're wearing. But we chose to stick with it, because joy is built when we let our barriers down, when we choose to be a bit vulnerable, when we show something of ourselves, when we choose to connect as human beings. And over the weeks and months ahead, as we kept on choosing to check in, wasting time on building relationships, we became friends rather than just colleagues. And we turned around that system very, very quickly. We've built joy back into the team in my practice, and right across Morecambe Bay, as we are building joy into our integrated teams and with our communities. We're seeing loads of fantastic new initiatives spring up in our communities, like community choirs and mental health cafes and comedy festivals. So let me ask you, in your team, in your community, how might you build some joy? Finally, we need to create a culture of kindness. When I was training as a GP, I walked into my tutorial one day and I let out a big sigh. A little bit of attention seeking. And my tutor said to me, "Oh, Andy," responding very well, "what's wrong?" And I said, I just had one of those real heart sink patients. You know, the kind that just comes back again and again and again and nothing ever changes. And she said, "Whoa, let me stop you right there." She said, "If your heart sinks when a person walks into your room, the problem is not with the patient, it's with your heart." I believe that we need to take the judgments and the assumptions that we make about other people, often fueled by reality TV and social media, and we need to put them aside. And instead, we need to embrace a whole load more kindness and compassion in how we choose to look at people, because we do not live their story. We do not understand their journey, and we do not have to go back into their reality. And what I'm finding is that there is kindness at work in our communities all the time. We just need to cultivate it more. And so let me ask you, how might you build kindness more where you are? Louis Pasteur has inspired us to create one of the best healthcare systems in the world. And yet, when we look across our communities, we would need to conclude that we are not well. And so I'm asking us together today, whoever we are, wherever we're from, whatever our role is, that we would also draw on the wisdom of Béchamp. That we would take a step outside the walls of what we know and learn to be with our communities and our teams differently. That we would build wellness. If we're really going to change the health of our whole population in our communities, then we need to make sure we build on the steadfast foundations of hope, inclusivity, joy, and kindness. If we do that, we will find that we can break age-old social injustices, and together we will create wellness for everyone. We cannot do it alone, but together, with our communities, we can. Thank you.